I believe in being punctual. We call this meeting to order. It's a committee meeting for the transportation, facilities and transportation. Order of business is the select a committee chair. And through everything else, I guess I'm it. We good? All right.
I'll second that motion.
I'll accept your nomination. Be properly moved and second that Elroy Broussard be nominated as chair. We need to go by the, we got to go by there? All right. Roll call. Aye.
Aye.
Does that need to be recorded, Ms. Melvin? You got it? Thank you, gentlemen. Item 202, freeze damage update. Item 2.3, transportation satellite bus transportation, health career academies. Item 2.4, satellite bus transportation, French Immersion. Agenda item 2.5, spot rezone Lafayette High School to Northside High School. 2.6, spot rezone S.J. Montgomery Elementary to Westside Elementary. 2.7, spot rezone Evangeline Elementary to Live Oak Elementary. No items pulled. In global? All right. The freeze damage, Mr. Bordelon.
Good evening, members of the committee. Kyle Bordelon, Director of Planning and Facilities. I've attached to the agenda item the damage, a report showing the initial damages that were called in to our office, and in the last column is a report as to the repairs that have been made up to date. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those at this time.
Yes, everything's pretty. Oh. Yeah. Everything's pretty back up and running, right?
Yes, sir. Pretty much. At Burke Elementary, there are some chilled water coils in 3 major air handler units that were being installed today. At Gallette, there's one cooling coil that's in shipment, and at Lafayette High for the auditorium, there's one cooling coil that's in shipment. Those are the most major things. The portable restrooms have all been restored at the various campuses where they have them, and what's remaining beyond that pretty much is exterior water fountains that we have ordered parts for, and we are awaiting those parts. I think it's approximately 10 or 11 schools where we're waiting parts on some of their water fountains, not necessarily all of them, but some of their water fountains we're waiting on parts to put them back fully functional again.
Thank you.
Mr. Bordelon, I want to do something that's very rarely done. Applaud you and your workers for, for a speedy, was work done in the speediest manner.
Thank you very much.
Most of the jobs I see it was complete or near completion. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Item 2.3, satellite bus transportation health career.
Committee members, district staff had brought this recommendation for consideration of parsing out the satellite transportation for the Health Careers Academy. as we grow the Northside Health Careers Academy, we're trying to encourage enrollment in that program, and it was felt that by parsing out the satellite transportation available for those two academies, that we'd encourage growth at the Northside Academy. There was no real scientific reason for the line that was proposed. I sat with transportation, district staff. I did talk to our demographer briefly about that topic. And what we were looking at is going from the St. Landry Parish line down Interstate 49, down to Johnson Street, then southwest on Johnson Street to the Vermilion Parish line. And the thought was kids, student academy members that lived west of I-49 and north of Johnson Street, we'd provide satellite transportation to those kids to Lafayette High. And if you lived east of I-49 and south of Johnson Street, we'd provide satellite transportation to Northside High School's Health Academy. And there was nothing that the agenda item does not, it still permits students that would live on the opposite side of that division to attend. Say if you live south of Johnson Street, you're still eligible to attend Lafayette High School's Health Careers Academy, vice versa. We just wouldn't have satellite bus stops on that side of the line. Dr. Aguilar and myself talked, even if you say live south of Johnson Street down towards the mall, if you got to the north side of Johnson Street to a satellite stop down there, you could catch that bus. We just wouldn't have satellite bus stops south of Johnson or east of I-49 going to Lafayette High, and then vice versa.
I know that this probably question is going to catch you off guard. Where is there a satellite bus stop for Lafayette High now on the south side of the north side of Johnson Street?
North side of Johnson Street,
like towards Maurice. I'm looking at you know looking at Johnson Street and right across. Where is one now that?
If I'm not mistaken, down East Broussard, West Broussard, and I believe we do have a satellite stop on East Broussard going to Lafayette High at this time.
If I'm not mistaken, the E Broussard Robley area has a good bit of students in the health academy there, so that would just put them crossing Johnson Street to get.
Yes, sir. And as we go into, as we make some final decisions or postpone, defer these decisions in the next month or so, transportation's ready to make the adjustments with our satellite stops, whether we move forward with these proposals or if we stand tight. We're still going to make some adjustments to the satellite stops based on the ridership numbers that we're getting this year.
Okay.
What's the ultimate goal, Mr. Craig, of this? Is it to increase enrollment in the academy? Is it to increase enrollment at Northside? Is it to have a better performing transportation? What?
You basically said all three. So number one, we'd like to utilize more classes at Northside High School. We have room to accommodate students. Lafayette High still has a large number of temporary classrooms. Number two, as I kind of mentioned early on, we'd like to encourage enrollment in the health careers program at Northside. And then number three, it's been mentioned before during board meetings that you got a bus on the south side going all the way to the far west with just 2 or 3 kids. We're trying to increase the utilization of the satellite buses. Now, and some satellite buses are utilized heavily, David Thibodeau in particular. But some of the programs, the kids really aren't utilizing the bus. Part of that's the convenience of the bus stop. We realize that, but we were trying to reduce the number of stops. So by dividing the parish, I can take the same number of buses and potentially just keep them on one side or the other of I-49 and Johnson Street.
I think I'm not going to speak to the transportation part because it makes sense. I'm just concerned about the other two parts, increase enrollment in the academy and increase enrollment at Northside. I agree that we want to increase enrollment in the academy and Northside, but it seems like we tried that and it didn't work. And I think that because we're not going to increase enrollment at the academy, we're not going to increase enrollment at Northside. I would rather see a spot rezone plan to accommodate that goal, preferably.
And again, staff and myself, the superintendent, we're trying to come up with some ideas that we want to share with you folks for decision on whether we need to action. We're certainly comfortable with that. We can work with that also.
Mr. Craig, the line west of I-49 in east of Pierce, I thought it was zoned for Northside. So we even
say that again. I'm sorry, sir.
We mentioned the if students living on I-49 north of Johnston and Charlotte High School and living on I-49 west of I-49, student west of I-49 has satellite stops to Lafayette High. Isn't that zone Northside area?
If you look on your screen right there to the right, Mr. Broussard, the green is Lafayette High. The interstate where it turns blue is Karen Crow. The pink is Northside. It's difficult to expand the map and still encompass the entire district, but it generally runs down the thruway for Northside versus Lafayette High.
I was under the impression the last rezoning at a certain area that we, I don't want to call his name, but it was east of Pierce that was zoned Northside High, and now it's satellite to Lafayette.
If you lived over on Pierce Street, I'm looking at the map with Miss Samick. If you lived on Pierce Street, you'd be home zone for Northside. Mm-hmm. You would catch a satellite bus to Lafayette High if you were in the Health Careers Academy at this point. And even with the recommended spot zone, that wouldn't change. You'd still be in the home zone for Northside. And in this case, if you were attending Lafayette High School's Health Careers Academy, you wouldn't have transportation because you're on the other side of the interstate, but you would be eligible to attend the Health Careers program at Lafayette High.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah. Mr. Craig, or someone, can you tell me quickly what was the enrollment in the Health Academy last year at Lafayette High and at Northside? Well, at Lafayette High.
I have December 7th, 2017 enrollment, which is going to be pretty close. Health Careers, 351.
And how many are at Northside right now?
There's 12.
12 currently,
and
the current school year.
And it can certainly...
Ninth grade.
Right.
Ninth.
But it could certainly accommodate more.
Yes, sir.
As well. What will the waiting list look like this year?
So currently we have 131 applications for Lafayette High School 9th grade, which has 100 seats available. And we have 10 applications for Northside, and they have 100 seats available.
To the 31 students waiting for Lafayette High.
131.
But we have a seat capacity of 100, so we'll have 31.
Yes, sir.
To the 31 that won't unfortunately be able to get in, if they are not zoned for Lafayette High, do they go to their home school or their zone school?
They would be offered the option to attend at Northside for the Health Academy. If they decline, they would remain at their home zone.
Okay. Thank you.
But would they get transportation? Because we don't know where they live, so...
So they, depending on whether they're east or west of I-49 and north or south of Johnson would decide whether they could have satellite transportation. Again, for those kids that are right on that line, if, like Mr. Latchley said, if they could just jump across Johnson Street to the closest satellite stop, they could be accommodated that way also.
Yeah, I'm not sure how unpopular it's going to sound, but I think we tried several different programs. I would prefer to see a spot rezone to fill Northside as opposed to continuing to put programs in programs. You know, Health Academy, one of the, if not the most popular program in the district, and we've got 12 students there and 10 applications. It's kind of problematic, and I don't know if the savings or the theoretical savings on transportation, and I say that respectfully, would come to fruition because of the numbers. So that's my opinion.
And we'll actually be talking about a Lafayette High North Side zone in one of the later agenda items tonight.
But I think it lends a starting point. It lends a starting point. I forgot to ask if there's anyone in the audience who wanted to weigh in on this. Sotomayor?
Hi, Ella Arsamon. Am I understanding this correct? If a student is zoned for Northside High School, they are still allowed to go to Lafayette High School's Health Academy, even though there's a Health Academy at Northside High? Is that correct?
Parents have that choice when they fill out the application.
Why wouldn't they be required to go to their own zone school's Health Academy first, since that it's the same program?
Our agenda,
same type of
yes,
program.
ma'am. Our agenda item didn't include that specific recommendation, but we would, if the board was comfortable with that action, we'd certainly make it happen.
I mean, to me, it would make more common sense that you go to your home's school zone first instead of getting bus transportation to go across town to the same program. Why did you create two programs? I mean, you're defeating the purpose if creating another program was because you had so many kids that wanted to be in the program, and yet they have one at their home school and they're not even taking advantage of that.
I understand what you're saying, ma'am.
Well,
that's kind of why we brought it up for discussion.
Okay.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Latchley?
I'm not sure if this was asked when I was speaking with Dr. Shasso. How many Health Academy seats total do we have at Lafayette High? And how many potential total seats would we have at Northside? I mean, if both with the max out.
100 applicants can be enrolled as a freshman at Lafayette High and 100 at Northside.
But total, 9 to 12.
Well, if they roll up 100%, then you would have 400.
Okay, yeah. That should have been simple mathematics. Right. Okay,
Yeah.
I guess
that's why we lose some students along the way. There is a late entry for 10th grade, and it's only for seats available.
Okay, so whereas we were sitting one day with a potential of only 400 students that could attend the Health Academy, what we're trying to do is allow 800 students to now attend the Health Academy.
That is correct.
I can't see where. I think we need to do everything possible to try to build the Health Academy at Northside. Is it run as I guess I'll call it a dual academy? Is the academy at Northside, it doesn't have its own director, right? Or
Mr. Lotchley, this board directed us to recommend that the Northside Health Academy would be identical to Lafayette High School. Now, we only had 9th graders this year with 12 students. So we have an instructor who's covering those two classes. We are committed to having a full-fledged health academy at Northside High School, but what we need to do is we need to get students in those seats. We are committed to making them identical in quality of the programs. But we've got to get more than 10 and 12 in the pipeline to justify a director and the cost to fully develop out the health academy. We're going to bring to you Wednesday of next week, we're going to bring to you a dollar amount for budgetary reasons to partially fulfill the equipment needs. We're asking you to consider the 9th and 10th grade materials as a starting point budgetarily. But I think you can appreciate we've got to have more than 10 and 12 students in the pipeline.
I'm just wondering if the students zoned for Northside that are now at Lafayette High, would it be, just wondering how many are at Lafayette High that would have been zoned for Northside.
I don't have those numbers in front of me. I can tell you for the freshman class, those that were on the waiting list, we did look to see if they were zoned for Northside. On the wait list, they were not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
One other thing before we motion for that, in one of our previous meetings, there were a great interest from Count Grove Middle in the Health Academy. I wish we would target the students from Count Grove Middle to sign up for the Northside Health Academy. I know they have the option to go wherever. The parents give them out. We give the parents the option to go wherever. But if we were trying to encourage them to build a program at Northside, it would be a good start for us.
And Mr. Broussard, that was a discussion in our pathway meetings that we had with the Health Academy directors, and actually, you know, the biomedical students can go to either program. We didn't feel that they should be defined that they can only go to one when both programs are duplicates.
Need a motion, bring that to the full board.
I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion that we go ahead and bring the satellite bus transportation healthcare academic academies to the full board.
Moved by Mr. Latchley. Guess I'll second if you don't. Call for the vote.
Two for, one against.
Item 2.4, satellite bus transportation, French Immersion.
Mr. Broussard, this is a similar item, but we're looking at the French Immersion programs at the elementary level. And again, we're trying to, in this instance, again, we're trying to cluster the satellite bus stops for the different immersion programs. And from my point of view, we're also trying to kind of balance out the enrollments at the different immersion programs, because there are some discrepancies in the enrollment. So in this case, and I will say, I'm going to start with number 4. There's four schools we're addressing. I will start with number 4 because number 4 regards French Immersion at Westside Elementary. That does not currently exist, and that will come before the board next Wednesday as an action item recommendation. We've talked about that before, but as I was preparing this agenda item for the committee and the board to consider, we went ahead and added that, and it does make that statement. If French Immersion expansion is approved for Westside Elementary, students that want French Immersion, if they attend Doosan and Austin and S.J. Montgomery, those students would have satellite transportation to Westside Elementary. I also need to make the statement that next year would just be pre-K and K. And again, as with the high school satellite transportation agenda item, if a student didn't live in the one of those zones, one of those schools, let's say they don't live in Doosan, Austin, or SJ's area, and they want to attend Myrtle Place, they'd be allowed to attend Myrtle Place, but we just have the satellite transportation for that cluster of schools in the west and the northwest. Then we jump back up to number 1. We do have French immersion at Evangeline. What we're recommending for consideration would be, if you are in the French immersion program at Evangeline, we would provide satellite transportation if you live in the Karen Crow Heights, J.W. Falk, Alice Boucher, and Live Oak elementary school zones. You could attend another school of French immersion, Prairie, Myrtle, West Side if it's approved, but we'd only have satellite transportation for Evangeline Elementary. Number 2, if you're in Prairie Elementary's French immersion program, we'd have satellite transportation for you if you're in the Broadmoor, Charles Burke, or Ridge area. And then number 3, Myrtle's a little different because it doesn't have a zone now, and it will be its own French immersion school. So there's several more schools. If you attend Plantation, Drexel, Linden, Gillette, Milton, Woodvale, we'd provide satellite transportation to Myrtle Elementary for you. You could attend any other of the French immersion schools. We'd just provide satellite transportation for those elementary clusters.
Mr. Latchley? Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we bring this item to the full board, satellite bus transportation for French immersion.
Second. I would think we did our homework, but what I wouldn't like to go back to is that curb service that we had offered in the past. Did we check how many students per satellite that we offering would be picking up if we're going to pick up a person at Calcro Heights to bring them to Evangeline Elementary?
If this agenda item was approved, as I'd mentioned earlier, we're going to have to go back and look at satellite stops, because this is a little different than what we're doing. Instead of having, say, a satellite stop down by the mall, and I'm not saying we do, instead of having a satellite stop at the mall to go to elementary immersion at Evangeline, what we'd trying to cluster those buses. We'd readjust the satellite bus stops so that they're closer to that cluster of elementary schools. Unless the board directs us otherwise, we will not be going back to that door-to-door model. We'll still use satellite stops, but we will adjust those satellite stop locations based on what the board would direct us in regards to the agenda item.
Before I give any other board member an opportunity to speak on it, is anyone in the audience want to address agenda item 2.4? And that, Mr. Lashley?
One of the questions I had, just looking at the breakup and speaking with Mr. Hidalgo, who represents Milton Elementary, just geographically speaking, I mean, if you had to draw a line, would it or would it not make sense to have Milton at Prairie? Or are we doing this because, like he had asked, is it population that you wouldn't send the Milton area satellite to Prairie? Or
we actually sat with Ms. Dickerson in technology, and utilizing the Guide K-12 software, we plotted where the kids live. We're certainly open to which schools would be assigned where, but when we ran these 4 scenarios, when we ran these 4 scenarios through Guide K-12, which is closely aligned to Mr. Hefner's software, we had a pretty equal balance out of where the kids would go. But I hesitate to say, Milton, hold on. you don't have a lot of kids leaving Milton to go to French immersion. That's leaving heaven.
Well, not only that, you also, you're picking up Green Teelan and Ernest Gallette, and it's kind of clustered, so you're make them drive farther for 2 or 3 students, or however many it is.
I think Milton, the Guy K-12 data looks like it shows 2 kids.
There you go.
Anyone else? Call for the vote.
Three, 4, none against.
Item 2.5, spot rezone Lafayette High School to Northside High School.
As I mentioned to Mr. Hidalgo earlier, this is an agenda item that we're asking the committee to consider recommending to the full board. Again, the purpose of this agenda item is, at this time, we have over 2,100 students at Lafayette High. We have, on February 2nd, Northside has, 660 kids. They did start out at 725 on the October 2nd count. And if Mr. Carbo in the back there could put up the attachment. Yes, sir, he's got it on your screens. Nope, he came through for me. If you look on the screens, what we're recommending for consideration is that orange section currently attends Lafayette High School, and we're asking the board to consider rerouting, rezoning those students to Northside High School. There are 300 kids, approximately 300 kids in that area, 9th to 12th, and they would be rezoned in the fall of 18 for Lafayette High. I would ask the public and the committee to keep in mind that the board approved an administrative rule several years ago. So if you're an upperclassman, a junior or a senior, you could remain at Lafayette High. And if you had a sibling, if you're a junior or senior and you have a sibling, they could remain at Lafayette High until the junior or senior graduated. So we were cognizant that juniors and seniors would not want to, after investing half their high school career in one school, they wouldn't want to leave. So the administrative rule is still in place. So to say 300 kids would move this fall from Lafayette High to Northside, that's certainly on the upper limit. If everybody chose to go, it would. But over time, as students matriculated through the administrative rule, that would increase enrollment at Northside High School unless they were accepted into a magnet school academy at some point in their career, high school.
How many 10th and 11th graders currently fall into that spot rezone?
I tried to catch everything. All right, so currently we would have this year's sophomores 491. So you'll probably have 450, 470 rising juniors next year.
I'm sorry. How many of them fit into that spot rezone area? So you said there were 300.
300 total. Actually, I did not have Mr. Hefner parse it out to the 4 grade levels. There's 300 9th to 12th. And when he came up with that recommendation for me, I really kind of did ask him for the whole 9th to 12th so that I could visualize what that number would look like in the future.
Sure, it makes sense. I think it's pretty safe to say that however many 10th and 11th graders in that spot rezone area are currently at Lafayette High School, that's how many in that spot rezone area that are going to remain 11th and 12th grade next year.
I don't bet very often, but I think you're right.
Not to include, and that's an unfortunate reality, not to include their siblings. So I'd like to know what the real numbers, and we know we can get a good idea what the real numbers look like if we just know how many students in those grades in that spot area.
Depending on the action of this committee, I'll certainly be in touch with Mr. Hefner and see if I can get a specific breakdown for you.
And board members, just to be clear, that this idea of rising students, it's about a 3-year process to work itself through. But if you start the process in 3 years, you'll have about 300 kids who are potentially eligible to go to Northside.
And definitely know that I'm in full support of what we're trying to do here. I guess maybe I'd just like to take the leap and get it done. And I'm not suggesting that we bend any of the rules or change any of the rules that we have. However, that's a huge gap. What's the capacity at Northside?
Hold on a second.
So there are lots of numbers based on prior years when we maybe did things differently. I would say at least 1,200 students could have at Northside.
So it's almost half of its capacity. I'm not going to even ask what Lafayette High's capacity is, but we get the point there. I mean, we're not necessarily trying to reduce capacity at Lafayette High. We're trying to increase capacity at Northside, which could, if it were done effectively, could again shift the entire parish and do a spot rezone for the entire parish to try to equalize the high schools. I'm all in favor of that. But, the vote earlier, which I know is in the past, that's not going to accomplish it. Okay, we had, Lord knows how many seats available. We had 12 students apply. And now what we're doing here, I think it's going to take quite some time to get done. So I applaud the end result, but we're just dragging this stuff way down the road.
On the map we're looking at, prior to this school year, where exactly was the cutoff that these students went to Acadiana? Some of these are just going to Lafayette High the first time this year.
So, yeah, so historically you're asking me that university, a lot of that area south, west of University and south of Cameron at one point used to go to Acadiana High. That little corner up there, what is known as Four Corners, a group of those kids went to Karen Crow, a group of those kids went to Acadiana. That was a significant change when Mr. Hefner rezoned.
Because
I don't remember the exact road. I don't think it was Walker. I think it was Cameron.
If you're looking at the area that's shaded, the area around Martin Luther King and I think the Truman School and stuff, that went to Acadiana. I'm not mistaken.
Sir.
And yes. I just don't know how far down that where it ended. But I can't see, to Mr. Hidalgo's point, I can't see where you're going to offer the administrative rule to the parish on a parish-wide rezone, and then you're going to do this spot rezone, and you're going to just uproot children, students, and say, well, look, you're just going to Northside next year, or you're going to Acadiana next year, you're going to Como next year. No, I didn't know if that's what you were speaking to, because you just wanted to stamp it and move all 310 right now. It is going to be a 3-year process, but it's a process, and it's a start. Because I was just wondering, because in the area that was taken from Acadiana, which basically went from Ambassador Caffrey, I-10, Cameron, all the way towards, Truman Elementary and so forth and so on. Acadiana didn't lose that many students, because there's still an area that was pulled from Acadiana that'll stay at Lafayette High. See what I'm saying? I mean, all the area that Acadiana lost, this is 310 from 9 to 12. How many students are still left? It just seems like a lot for that little area, because, Acadiana only lost like 300, 400 students, if I'm not mistaken.
I think what's affecting that number is when you go farther away from the interstate down there, you got a lot of residential homes on the southern end of that spot rezone.
That was always Lafayette High? Yeah,
as far as I can remember,
okay,
yes,
so
sir.
that was so what you have is a zone that was basically probably almost half Acadiana at one time and Lafayette High. Okay,
yes, sir.
That makes sense.
And transportation just gave me an update at Walker Road was the cutoff, was the division.
Right. Okay.
I think Martin Luther King was the cutoff for Acadiana High. That area, it went from Acadiana High to Lafayette High, now to Northside. and we had an administrative rule in place the last time we made that decision. So those rising juniors and seniors still had that option. Now, if we are going to pass this rising junior and senior will still have that option. Right. So last year we were 2 years of making this complete. Now we're still 2 to 3 years of making this complete. So you know, it's those students have been moved several times over the last few years, several times, and so it's just an observation that, and so I'll comment on that later. Anyone from the audience? Ms. Ottoman.
Okay. If you rezone, but you still allow a student who is zoned for Northside High School to go to Lafayette High School's Health Academy program, how is this going to solve the problem? I'm trying to understand it, and it doesn't make common sense to me. If you're saying, okay, we're going to rezone, but you're still allowing these students to go to a different school. Best thing you could do is require them to go to the health academy closest to their zone school so that you can build a program. Mr. Broussard just said that Karen Crow Middle, or is it Karen Crow Middle, has the biology program, medical program. Well, they probably are zoned closer to Northside than Lafayette High School. It'd be best if they were required to go to Northside. You've got some good kids coming in who've got a pretty good start in the healthcare field from taking biology to build that program. Just saying. This
is a totally different agenda item. This is regular ed. This is not academy students. This is a complete rezone of regular ed children, just regular.
My bad.
That's okay.
My bad.
That's okay. Well, I could see the.
But it's. I still made a point. I mean, right. It's something to consider.
Yes, right. Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
A quick request of staff, if we could get as well the number of K through 8 kids that are within that boundary line.
In that orange zone?
Yeah, in that orange zone.
K to 8?
Yeah, so we can get an idea of how many kids inevitably
in the future.
Yeah, may possibly attend there, and then as well a breakdown of that K through 8, and as well 9 through 12, if any of those kids are specifically in a school of choice, because even though it may say 310 kids that are 9 through 12, 50 of those kids may already be at STEM or at Como for performing arts or something of that nature. So I'm just trying to get a good grasp on, I know seniors technically don't count because seniors won't apply. I'm assuming rising juniors, yeah,
usually
rising
don't.
Seniors, rising juniors usually don't. But I mean, if that leaves 80 freshmen, but 50 of them are already in some school of choice already, then that's only 30 kids that will move with that first year spot rezoning. I'm just trying to get a good grasp as well. The K through 8, if a kid is in a STEM pathway, then that kid won't be attending Northside inevitably, possibly. So I'm just trying to get a grasp on how many kids it ends up being.
So yes, sir, I'll get with Ms. Samick and see if she can assist me with magnet schools, choice kids in that spot zone K to 8, and then I'll get with Mr. Hefner to get K to 12, really for just zone kids.
Thank y'all.
One quick question.
Go ahead.
Mr. Craig, would you happen to know offhand how many students are zoned for Northside that attend the Health Academy at Lafayette? Would you happen to know that?
No, I don't.
We don't have that
number.
No, sir. Sorry.
Thank you.
I can understand the intent of moving the line to include more population, but from a different standpoint, I really do think see if I can put this in the right context here. We got some challenges that we need to overcome, and I think populating the student population is great, but to me, it's not it's not that great of a priority over something else. And don't want to venture off in any specific words, but although I certainly applaud the student population growth, but we've got to perfect some other things before we start inviting guests over, to put it softly. Having said that, call for the motion. Call for the vote.
I'd like to move approval of item 2.5, spot rezone Lafayette High School to Northside High School.
I'll second it.
Moved by Mr. Hidalgo, second by Mr. Lachele.
As it's written, yes, ma'am. That's what I meant to say. Call for the vote.
Three, four, none against.
2.6 spot rezone for S.J. Montgomery Elementary to West Side Elementary.
So if Mr. Carbo could go to the next map for Montgomery West Side, again, we're looking at one of the unexpected consequences of the major rezone last year was Montgomery grew much more than was expected. In part, that's because Woodvale doesn't have a fifth grade, so we ended up having to send most of those fifth graders in the Woodvale area to Montgomery, which brought siblings along. And downtown, we really don't have a home zone school, Myrtle Place, so kids in that portion of the town really had to go to Montgomery. October 2nd, Montgomery had, I want to say, 813, and I think Miss Robin pointed out yesterday, I think she may be 843, so they're growing. So they are at capacity. She's doing an outstanding job, but every day she's asking for relief. We're finishing up the renovations on the west side, and so we're asking the committee to consider recommendation to the full board of that orange area and the center of that map. We would send those students who currently attend SJ to west side, and again, the administrative rule would apply at the elementary level. That the administrative rule only applies to the fifth graders. So where Dr. Aguilar mentioned kind of a 3-year process at the high school level, it's more of a 2-year process to transition kids at the elementary level to a new zone, considering the administrative rule. That number of kids in that orange is about 115 kids, and we could have shot for a bigger number. Mr. Hefner tries to follow natural geographic lines, and as I mentioned earlier, next week you'll be considering placing a French immersion program at West Side. So it's a small school, it's going to be a really nice school, we've seen the renovations, but we don't want to overload it in one fell swoop. So we're going to try to send 100 regular home zone kids over there, and with your approval, look at opening a French immersion site out at West Side.
Motion.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we approve the spot rezone S.J. Montgomery to West Side, and then I have a request or a comment after.
Been moved by Mr. Lashley, seconded by Mr. Hidalgo. Comments from the audience.
I have two very brief comments. One is, should this be approved, and this is related to your earlier agenda item about the French immersion transportation. The Montgomery zone, I believe it says would get bus transportation to the west side. If you're going to rezone this to west side, consider sending buses from the Montgomery zone to either Prairie or Myrtle Place, as you're kind of taking a lot of the top off the Montgomery zone. I think it made a lot of sense with the kids who live near the interstate to go right down Cameron Street to Scott. But, you know, I mean, like Myrtle Place is in the Montgomery zone. So just a consideration if this actually gets approved. And the other thing, the middle school zone is Lafayette Middle School, right?
For SJ, yes, sir.
In particular, that orange spot. So
yes, sir, I believe so.
This is more of a philosophical question about the spot rezones. Are we looking at middle and high school as well? Because one of the things that we really strove to accomplish with the rezone plan was to reduce the middle school splits, the split zones, things like that.
Yes, sir. Vertical articulation, absolutely.
That's a lot of syllables.
Yeah, look, that was a college word. So that was a factor. I guess my overriding factor in talking with staff and making the recommendation is SJ's just packed.
No, I know that.
And I just got to move some. At some point, and we've said it before, we're going to look at spot rezones periodically instead of waiting 20 and 30 years from now. And I think you're right. At some point, we need to consider that. But we really need to alleviate the pressure on Montgomery at this point.
I agree. Thank you.
Mr. Santani, there are 2 students currently in the SJ zone that are attending French immersion. At Myrtle. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Shashaw.
Capacity for West Side? Capacity for West Side? The new West Side? Just curious.
Hold on, sir. She had 303 on October 1st. We spoke to her 2 days ago. She could accommodate 1 class each of all the immersion levels. So you're talking 6 times 25, and then another 100 kids. So 500 at one point.
She'll be going back to her permanent facility, and with the temporary buildings, she told me yesterday she can accommodate over 400 easily.
Yeah. Okay. Staff did sit and talk with her this week.
How many temporary buildings do they have?
She's got 8.
8, okay.
Classrooms.
Okay.
8 temporary classrooms.
My name is Jessica Wells. You're saying if a 5th grader wants to stay at SJ Montgomery, they would have to provide their own transportation in this motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Under Section 11, under the Louisiana State Transportation, it says, in accordance with Louisiana Revised Statute 17-158, each parish and city school board shall provide free transportation for any student who attends a school of suitable grade approved by the school board of elementary and secondary if the student resides more than 1 mile from each school and the school is within the jurisdictional boundaries of the parish or city school board. So that would mean all of the school, by what it's saying under jurisdiction, because it's all a parish, they're residing within the parish.
So ma'am, if you lived in that orange spot rezone, we would provide transportation 0.2 miles from your home, but the transportation would be to Westside Elementary because it would be rezoned. If you chose as a 5th grader to remain at Montgomery, we would allow that, but that's not that wouldn't be the zone school for that 5th grader, so transportation wouldn't be supplied. But we would provide district approved 0.2 miles from the house to Westside within guidelines of the statute.
Oh, okay, but that thing within, okay.
Mr. Lashley.
If all of these items make the full board on Wednesday, which I probably think they will, could we have a more accurate number of the students that would move, minus the rising fifth graders or so forth? So we have a little more accurate.
I will contact, unless Mr. Hefner's watching tonight, I will contact him at 4:45 in the morning.
I sent you an email at 3:30 and you answered it in the morning one time, so I'm sure you will, Mr. Craig.
Mr. Craig, those students that's if the request is honored to go to West Side, would those students be in transition to Lafayette Middle, or where would they go?
At this point, that spot rezone, that area of Lafayette currently attends Lafayette Middle, and so I think that was what Mr. Santani's point was we'd like those to articulate between middle elementary and high school, and in all honesty, I'd like to talk with staff and Mr. Hefner to see if we could address that, because that was one of our original purposes in the major rezone, but we needed to give some relief to Montgomery because of their overpopulation. I think ideally they should go to Lafayette Middle. It's a little awkward for them to go to West Side for a couple years and then have to go back into town, and I think I need to have some conversations with staff and Mr. Hefner about that longer term implication.
Anything else? And these items that we are approving is to be brought to the full board. So this is not etched in stone. Having said that, call for the vote.
Three, for, none against.
Agenda items 2.7, spot rezone Evangeline Elementary to Live Oak Elementary.
Again, this is another spot zone north of the interstate. This is the smallest of the three recommended. I think most of you are familiar with the large number of temporary classrooms at the Evangeline Elementary site. There are, as a result of the rezone, a few available classes at Live Oak. So we talked to staff, talked with transportation, talked to Mr. Hefner, and that trapezoid, that rectangle, orange, we would send those kids who currently attend Evangeline, those kids would go to Live Oak. The administrative rule applies again for fifth graders, and that represents about 60 kids, and that would be basically one portable building, and we could maximize the occupation at Live Oak.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move approval.
Second.
All right. Any questions from the audience?
What's the Live Oak capacity?
Live Oak, I'm sorry. She's got 707. She said she could accommodate. When I called her last week about this, she said 750, 775. Okay. 800 would be pushing it without adding additional temporary buildings.
How many does Live Oak have? None?
Live Oak has none.
None, okay. How many does Evangeline have?
Ooh, Evangeline has, they have their own zip code.
Yeah, I know.
Hold on, I'm sorry. They have 28 temporary classrooms, which is basically 14 buildings.
Okay.
And a temporary restroom.
So 14. And do we happen to know what the breakdown of the kids are that will be leaving Evangeline? Like as far as, is this kindergarten? Is a lot of second graders? No, we don't have that breakdown.
No, I'm going to get with Mr. Hefner and all these schools that are affected by the spot rezoning. I will have K to 5 or 9 to 12 enrollments for you. I'll try to get for every school that I can get enrollment counts. I'll have that for you.
Okay.
By say Monday afternoon for sure.
And are these immersion kids at all?
No, sir.
No. Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. All right.
She had in our conversation, she could accommodate them, and then I also talked to Miss Dewey because Live Oak does not have pre-K, but it's Live Oak kids that want to attend pre-K go to Truman, so they'd still have service.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, it would help if we had that information on Wednesday when we do meet, that we'll have as close as we can specific numbers as to what grades is going to be making the transition. It would ease the decision. The motion was made by Mr. Lashley, seconded by Mr. Hidalgo. If there are any other questions from the audience, from the board members, call for the vote.
Three, 4, none against.
That was the last agenda item. Meeting is adjourned.